Hello, welcome back to Movie Husbands, and happy Oscar nomination day. Jeffrey made some espresso martinis, and we are ready to go. It's 11 a.m. So we're going to start with Best Animated Feature. The nominees are Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, Turning Red, The Sea Beast, and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish.
So Marcel the Shell shouldn't be here?
That's ridiculous. That's absurd. You know that's my favorite movie of the year.
So Turning Red was okay. I thought it was kind of lesser Pixar, I guess, in terms of the year. It deserves to be here. Marcel the Shell, I think, is a great film. We talked about it a lot in our top 10 video, so I love that that's here. Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, we still have to watch. I suspect it's going to be very good from what I hear. I did want to talk about one snub, which is a film called Mad God that was released by Shudder this year. It's an adult film. It's actually like a quasi-horror film that's an animated film, but was really well reviewed and just like a really extraordinary piece of stop motion work. So I just wanted to mention that. It was never part of the conversation, so I can't really call it a snub. But I would have really liked to have seen it here because it's a fantastic film, but it just never hit the mainstream Oscar conversation.
Yeah, and I don't know how much Wendell and Wild was in the conversation for the Oscars. I didn't really keep up on that, but I did really enjoy that movie, and it was fantastic in terms of stop motion animation. So that's another one that may be missing from here, but at the same time, it's a very good lineup. We haven't seen Puss in Boots either, yeah. But people are raving about this movie. The audible clapping that we heard during the announcement of this film being
something's happening with this movie.
Something's going on. But of course, Marcel the Shell is what I want to win because that was my favorite movie of the year, period. Mm-hmm. I know it's probably not going to win, but it's what I hope would win.
Best Costume Design. We have Elvis, Babylon, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris.
I always really enjoy the costume design category because I think so much of costumes influence the film and the characters themselves. What's so great about Everything Everywhere All at Once is that there's all these different timelines. And there's all these opportunities for different costume designs in these different timelines, especially with Evelyn. Like one, she's a movie star. Another one, she's got her and Jamie Lee Curtis have hot dogs for fingers. So there's so much room for costume design in this film that I just really appreciated that movie. And also Black Panther Wakanda Forever. It's the costume design I find is very striking, especially with Angela Bassett as the queen. She is just glowing in those costumes that they have her in. They're so ornate, and they're the huge head pieces that she has, they're just absolutely insane.
Yeah, so I think this category is kind of interesting. So you have Elvis, which requires like 60s kind of style costume design, but you're also mimicking real life events that we have videos of, that we have records of how people would look. So you have to mimic that in a certain sense. Babylon is kind of another, because you're not mimicking exactly real life events, but you have to show the 20s, so that's one style too. We're probably going to talk about this at another point too, and I apologize to our loyal viewers because we talk about this all the time, but Everything Everywhere All at Once is competing with films that are mostly much, much more expensive. So for instance, Everything Everywhere had a $25 million budget. I think Elvis was in the low hundreds, Babylon was $100 million, Black Panther was $200 million. So the fact that they got nominated and were able to, again, stretch that budget to have all of these wonderful costumes going up against films that are literally 8 times its budget, I think is really cool and a good reason for it to win.
And next up, we have Best Sound. The nominees are All Quiet on the Western Front, Avatar: The Way of Water, The Batman, Elvis, and Top Gun: Maverick.
I genuinely feel like all of these have a good reason to win. I did not see All Quiet on the Western Front in a theater, unfortunately. I watched it on Netflix. The sound is amazing. Top Gun: Maverick, who's going to argue if that wins Best Sound? I also like that The Batman got in here. I think we'll see it in a couple other categories, but it getting a couple of technicals I think was really cool because the level of artistry that I think went into that film was quite a bit higher than your typical superhero film. So I like that it was recognized, and I hope that it's some inspiration to put more artistry in our superhero films and our big budget films.
I completely agree. It's really nice to see The Batman get some love in here, especially in the technicals. I keep referring back to that chase sequence, the car chase sequence that happens on the highway. The amount of sound and little details that are in that one scene alone is absolutely insane.
One movie that's not here that I'd like to mention is Tar, which I think sound is very important in that film. The sound and the score became more conflated. So the score in that film is actually, if you listen to it, there's a lot of the score that was produced that doesn't make its way into the film. But then she was also collaborating with the sound department and the director to incorporate some of the odd sounds in that film into it. That film is very intelligently designed from a detail perspective. So there are little things like a switch that's clicking in her car. She has this real sensitivity to sound that I think comes through really intelligently in the film and is unfortunately not recognized here. It would be kind of an uncommon pick. They typically go for movies like Top Gun Maverick here, and I certainly understand why, but the sound fits so nicely into what that film is going for and how we feel about it that I would have liked to see it recognized.
It's actually a little bit unfortunate that it's not recognized here, and I think you bring up a good point, is the sound design in that film has so much to do with building tension and suspense. It's not really over the top, and it's not doing something bombastic, but that's kind of the point.
The nominees for Best Documentary are All That Breathes, Fire of Love, A House Made of Splinters, All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, and Navalny.
I am really excited for this category because it's the first time we actually reviewed and saw 3 documentaries that made it into the Oscars. So that is really cool to see.
And we haven't seen All That Breathes just because it's not available yet.
Oh.
I've had my eye on that one for a long time and I really want to see it, but it's not available yet.
I think All the Beauty and the Bloodshed I'd really love to see win here, but I would be completely happy if Fire of Love won.
That's how I feel. I think if Fire of Love wins, I think it's a bit more of a crowd-pleasing pick, and I can understand if it won. You're not going to hear any negatives from me. I always try to root for the more avant-garde pick, so I'm always going to go for All the Beauty and the Bloodshed. It's also my #2 favorite movie of the year, so how could I not pick that film? I'm really glad it was nominated because the documentary branch has such a habit of snubbing the one that everybody thinks is going to get in. Yeah. So I thought that Fire of Love would be snubbed. I thought All the Beauty and the Bloodshed might get snubbed. I'm very, very glad that it didn't. The fact that it's in contention at all is enough of a win for me.
Yeah, and if you're interested, we do have reviews on our channel for all 3 of those documentaries, Fire of Love, Navalny, and All the Beauty and the Bloodshed. We'll link them in our description, as well as all reviews for anything that we mentioned in the nominees.
Also, House Made of Splinters. I guess this was a surprise. This is the first time I've heard of this film, and I do try to track what people think are going to be nominated. So I watch Oscar Expert a lot and see what they think are going to be nominated.
Did they expect this?
I don't think so.
The way they're going to react in the video probably.
Psyched. I'm literally, I'm refreshing YouTube every 3 minutes.
The couch, like,
yeah, the zoom in, the cat running. I'm really excited. I'm not making fun of them at all.
No, it's going to be the best. We love it.
I love their videos. Matt, you're not drinking your espresso martini.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
It brings you up and it brings you down. It's a perfect drink.
I'm going to be editing like a madman. I'm going to be like... Speaking of, the next category is Best Film Editing. The nominees are Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Banshees of Inisherin, Elvis, Tar, and Top Gun Maverick.
Maybe it just shows that we have a really strong crop of nominees here, but I look at this lineup and I say, I'd be pretty happy with any of these winning. I think that Everything Everywhere All at Once has a good case because they have to cut between all of those different timelines, but they also have to make it emotionally resonant. Like there's a part towards the end where all the timelines are essentially collapsing on one another, leading to that climactic hug. To do that is really difficult from an editing perspective, and to make that emotionally resonant is kind of a miracle. So I think that has a really good shot at winning. That might be my pick if I had to pick one. I also want to shout out Tar, that I think is really intelligently edited. That film has so many details that are so full of ambiguity about the characters, about the themes, and they're all perfectly placed with one another. There are these 10-second shots of somebody editing her Wikipedia page. There are these small little character details of her hearing a scream in the woods, and I could see all of those scenes that feel inconsequential on their own, the way that you choose to sequence them can really radically alter the way that the viewer is viewing the film. So I think that the way they chose to sequence them is really intelligent and really cool in Tar, so I wanted to shout that out. Obviously, editing Top Gun Maverick would be a massive undertaking.
When I think of film editing, I definitely think of not just the editing being well done, but the way that it complements the movie itself. Mm-hmm. And I think you have very good cases for all these nominees. If I had to say one that was my favorite, I think it would be Everything Everywhere All at Once. Not only does the editing complement the story and the footage, but it also replaces a lot of visual effects work that would have been done. So there's a lot of practical editing in that movie that appears like visual effects are happening on your screen, but it's really just editing.
Yep.
The way that they accomplish that, I think, is just absolutely fantastic. Top Gun, like you said, it was one thing I was going to mention in this category, was just the undertaking that was going to be had by all this footage and splicing it together to make a coherent narrative and story with the hours and hours and hours and hours of footage that they had is just remarkable.
The flying sequences being edited is one thing. That's one massive undertaking, but making a story that, like, I was tearing up a little bit in the theater is a whole other thing. So there's a lot going on in that editing room.
We didn't talk about the Banshees of Inisherin, probably not as flashy of a pick. One thing about the editing in that film is almost where the other ones we had talked about are more noticeable edits. Banshees of Inisherin, it flows very well in a sense that you almost don't notice the editing at all. And I think there's something to be said for that as well.
All right, the nominees for Best Cinematography are Empire of Light, All Quiet on the Western Front, Elvis, Tar, and Bardo.
So this is one of my favorite categories usually, and I think in this case there is a wonderful mixture of styles here in terms of cinematography, which is nice to see. I'm a little sad not to see Top Gun Maverick here, and I think just because some people take cinematography and they assume it's just the picture and what you see. A lot of that usually comes down to the director of photography actually, is the look of a shot. And the essence of a cinematographer is really dealing with the equipment, what lenses are you picking to help create the look that you're making. I think Top Gun Maverick has so much going for it in that sense because of all the camera work that needed to be accomplished. The amount of equipment that was necessary to capture so much of this insane footage, I think in its own right is deserving of being in this category.
And again, I know I keep saying this, but the fact that the movie is good is just the ice cream on the cake. Anyway, yeah.
Honestly, I'm not mad to not see Avatar here. I've always had this problem with Avatar, that I feel like the visual effects and the story don't really complement each other well enough. The idea is going for grandeur, and it's always something that I just like, oh, they did that for the hell of it. Yeah. But I'm just like, what does it mean? What feeling do I get from it? And I'm not sure I get much from it at all.
Yeah.
That's just me personally. I know some people love Avatar, but that's just the way
I agree. We have a really good friend who's like an Avatar stan. I hope he watches this.
Oh, he's going to watch it and be upset with us.
Last year, I talked about how I think people often conflate production design and cinematography. I think a little of that is happening with Bardo. Bardo is well shot, but it's shooting these extraordinarily beautiful choreographed sequences of just crazy things happening. The camera movement and how they choose to use the camera is interesting, but I have a suspicion that they're looking a lot at what's going on the screen and crediting it with cinematography. All Quiet on the Western Front is very well shot, so I'm very happy to see it here. And I'm going to steal your words from our Tar review that you're almost looking at perfection on screen from how much intent there is with the way that it's shot.
Just a side note, because we haven't really been talking about Elvis has been in a few categories here and we haven't mentioned it at all, and that's because we have not seen it. And next up we have the nominees for Best Production Design. The nominees are All Quiet on the Western Front, The Fabelmans, Elvis, Babylon, and Avatar: The Way of Water.
So I think I would pick All Quiet on the Western Front here. I think that is one of the best produced war movies I've seen in quite some time.
I know Everything Everywhere at Once wasn't even considered for this category, but I really think the production design in that film is really well done. Mm-hmm. Also, another thing I'd like to add on top of that is just how practical it is, which is something I really appreciate about production design. Avatar, I think, you know, that could just leave this because the amount of blue screens and the amount of stuff. Can you include that as production design? That's an interesting conversation.
I don't know. In Avatar, I think it's a little more clear what the production design is. Like anything that's practical in that movie is the ocean.
But what
is anything practical in that movie?
But what am I saying? What I'm saying is that considered production design? Is the setup that you need to accommodate even that situation considered production design?
I don't know. I mean, but then who's making it, the production designer or the visual effects department? It's not the same department.
I don't know.
Listen, there is production design, like they have a production designer and that person is doing something and they're adding to the overall experience of Avatar. But because the film is so special effects heavy, I really don't know how to separate it and evaluate it. The way that the Oscar nominations are coming about is that people who are production designers vote for production design. So they're the experts, right? They're like the scientists in this scenario. So they're voting for Avatar for a reason. They're seeing something there. You know, we can't just come in and say, oh, the visual effects department did it all, and the production designers were just, you know, eating catering all day. I don't mean to say that, but there's something that I'm not totally understanding there.
Another film that I wish was recognized in this category was Glass Onion, because I wish that it got a little bit more recognition in this overall season. But in terms of production design, I feel like there was so much about it that complemented the characters itself in terms of its design.
And in the story, because the glass barrier between the Mona Lisa and the people becomes pretty integral to the end of the film. Edward Norton's character's car becomes like a pretty funny in-joke towards the end of the movie. So they use production design really well in that film for both comedy, for story, and for character. So I agree with you. That would have been a really good pick.
And I do want to give a little shout out and love to Babylon because the production design, and Damien Chazelle in particular, I feel like his movies really focus on the practicality of his set designs. And it was one of my favorite things about La La Land was the set design and production design in that film. So I feel like in terms of Babylon itself, there are so many practical sets in this movie that are so ornate and so detailed, and they influence the vibe that you're going for.
The Best Adapted Screenplay nominees are Glass Onion, A Knives Out Mystery, Women Talking, Top Gun Maverick, All Quiet on the Western Front, and Living.
I think what I can say about Top Gun is I'm not too,
I don't get it.
I don't get it.
I just think that all of its positive attributes are outside of its screenplay.
Yes, agreed. I think Glass Onion, of course, it's nice to see Glass Onion finally get some love in the Oscars. I wish it got a little bit more love in this overall award season.
Feels like deja vu, doesn't it? That Knives Out wasn't nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, or anything, but it got, here's a screenplay nomination. I'm glad both films made it in at all, but I would love to have seen a little more from either of them.
Rian Johnson has done a wonderful job, directing this film and writing them. It's absolutely astounding how he does it, and he makes this movie quirky and witty and fun.
So I think All Quiet on the Western Front is kind of a cool pick here because we start to think about adaptation and what that means for best writing, best adapted screenplay. All Quiet on the Western Front is a book that a lot of us read in middle school or high school, maybe one of the first war novels we read because it's fairly slim and its themes are pretty easy to pick out. The war is hell theme is a pretty easy one in that book. I think that they did a very good job adapting not only the events of that book, but the feel of it also. It's very true to its source material, so if you want to take that into account when you're talking about an adaptation, I think it's totally worthy of being here.
And next up we have Best Original Screenplay. The nominees are The Banshees of Inisherin, Tar, Triangle of Sadness, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and The Fabelmans.
Tar, baby. Let's go. Tar! No, I don't know. I mean, the Tar screenplay, I would love if it won. I kind of want Martin McDonagh to win. He's never won an Oscar. He's a very, very good writer. I think he's been nominated for screenplay for 3 out of his 4 films. I think he finally deserves to win.
I love Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's one of my favorite. It's my second favorite movie of the year. I'm not sure of screenplay. I do see Tar and The Banshees of Inisherin as a little bit more, I don't know, is it like a serious thing? Like maybe because they're more serious movies that I feel like a lot more has to go into crafting the tiny minute details that happen in that film?
Maybe. I think they're also both putting writing at the forefront of what makes them so good.
That is very true. I think in terms of who I want to win, I would lean towards The Banshees of Inisherin and Martin McDonagh. The characters are so perfectly written and also their dialogue between each other.
Another thing about Tar is that if you look at the way Cate Blanchett speaks when she's in front of an audience, like the way she speaks at the Juilliard, she says things like punt and a punt, which I don't know even what that means. But the way she talks to her wife, played by Nina Haas, is quite a bit more restrained. So it heightens this idea of persona and a false identity that she's adopting. That's another, I think, aspect that's very intentional in the screenplay that makes it worthy of a win here. The nominees for International Feature are Close, Argentina 1985, EO, The Quiet Girl, and All Quiet on the Western Front.
Unfortunately, I don't have much to say here because I have not seen any of these pictures. And the reason for that is last year the Oscars took place a little bit later, the nominations, and a lot of these movies had been released at that point in time last year. In this case, 3 of these movies have not even released yet. And so we have not had the opportunity to see them. I know you've seen All Quiet on the Western Front, so you can talk about that in a minute. What I am going to talk about is a little bit of an annoyance that I have with this category. I know that they do this where each country can only submit 1 film for consideration as a way of probably including multiple different countries. This annoys me so freaking much. Hit the Road here is something that I absolutely think deserves to be in this category. Iran did not submit it, and there's a bunch of political things going on right there, and for reasons they did not submit it, whatever they are, I think is very unfortunate because I think it should have been considered here. I know we really do have plans to see Close, and I am going to see All Quiet on the Western Front.
I've been reading about Close since it premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. I've been wanting to see Close forever, and it just has not played near us, and it's not on VOD, but I'm very anxious to see it. I've heard about The Quiet Girl recently. I can't wait to see it. EO, I'm very interested to see because it's influenced by one of my favorite Bresson films, and also this director. I've been watching his films on the Criterion Channel, so I've watched a lot of his 70s and 80s output, and they're really interesting, and they're really transgressive. To your point, though, there are certain parts of the world that are blowing up from a cinema perspective, right? Like South Korea comes to mind. So South Korea this year had to choose between Decision to Leave from Park Chan-wook, who is a very famous South Korean director, or Broker from Koreeda, who is a very famous South Korean director, and they ultimately chose Decision to Leave. But then you leave another film by Koreeda on the table that's just as good and can't be nominated. I think this was originally put into consideration because so many of the nominees would have been French nominees at a certain point. But now that's spread so much among all of these different wonderful countries who have all of these wonderful films that they're putting out that I wish that rule could be adjusted in some way.
Yeah, it's really dated. And if you haven't gotten the impression already, this is probably one of our favorite categories in general.
Yeah, I'm more into international feature than I am Best Picture usually.
And next up, we have Best Supporting Actor. The nominees are Judd Hirsch for The Fabelmans, Brendan Gleeson for The Banshees of Inisherin, Barry Keoghan for The Banshees of Inisherin, Brian Tyree Henry for Causeway, and Kihei Kwan for Everything Everywhere All at Once.
This category is stacked. I think I would pick Kihei Kwan. I think he's really, really good in the movie. I also think his comeback story is a little bit why I want him to win. He didn't act for so long. There wasn't roles for his age group when he got to a certain age for Asian actors. I find really heartbreaking, and just the fact that he was lured back to the screen by the Daniels, I just think is a great story, and on top of it, he's so good in the film. But this category is stacked.
It really is.
Judd Hirsch is only in The Fabelmans for 8 minutes, but it's perhaps the best 8 minutes of The Fabelmans, and I mean that as no detriment because I really like The Fabelmans. Brendan Gleeson and Barry Keoghan are so good in The Banshees of Inisherin. I'm really glad that they got double nominated. I have not seen Causeway, and I will certainly see it before the Oscars, but I am the most gigantic Brian Tyree Henry fan. He is such a good actor. Every film he's in, I am a huge fan of Atlanta, so now we have Lakeith Stanfield, who is Oscar nominated, and we have Brian Tyree Henry, who is Oscar nominated. So all we need is Zazie Beetz and Donald Glover, and we'll have a whole Oscar-nominated quadruple there. So that's awesome.
When we saw him come through on the TV screen, we were like, yes!
Yeah, and I haven't told you yet, but I spilled coffee on the couch, so because I was jumping up and down.
Serious?
Yeah,
Oh
I
my
cleaned
gosh.
it. You won't notice. The nominees for Best Supporting Actress are Hung Chow for The Whale, Carrie Condon for The Banshees of Inisherin, Angela Bassett for Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, Jamie Lee Curtis for Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Stephanie Hsu for Everything Everywhere All at Once.
So I mean this with no shade to any of these actresses, but Stephanie Hsu, she is my favorite to win here. Of course, everybody else is amazing. Carrie Condon, I absolutely love, and I think it also needs to be mentioned, the entire main cast of The Banshees of Inisherin and Everything Everywhere at Once all got nominations, which is really cool to see.
I absolutely love Jamie Lee Curtis as a human being. I don't understand why she's here. I think she's good in the movie, but there are more deserving people. I think Janelle Monáe should have been there instead of Jamie Lee Curtis. I'm rooting for either Stephanie Hsu or Carrie Condon. I think Carrie Condon really makes The Banshees of Inisherin. Not that it would be bad without her, but there's an emotional element that I think really grounds the film with her performance, because she really makes you feel how stupid their argument actually is at its core, but it also leads to an understanding of both men, because you know, Colin Farrell's character is her brother, but she also has this connection with Brendan Gleeson's character because she is a reader. She wants to leave the island and become a librarian and do something else with her life. It almost gives more presence and more grounded qualities to both of those performances.
And next up, we have Best Actor. The nominees are Austin Butler for Elvis, Bill Nye for Living, Brendan Fraser for The Whale, Paul Mescal for Aftersun, and Colin Farrell for The Banshees of Inisherin.
Paul Mescal! Let's go. So that is the second time I spilled coffee on the couch this morning. Don't worry, I cleaned it. But I was like literally jumping up and down on the couch with my coffee. I'm so happy that he got nominated. Aftersun, there are people that like Aftersun more than me. I think it's a really good movie.
It wasn't on your top 10. You put Jackass Forever over it.
Yeah, I know. It was on my honorable mentions. It wasn't on your honorable mentions at all, but I hope we can agree that Paul Mescal is so good in that movie. He was like part of the conversation, but it was never like, oh, he's totally gonna get in. So as soon as I saw his nomination, he was the one I wanted to win. I really want Paul Mescal to win. I don't think he's going to win, but he's so good in that film, and he's so good in everything that he does. I wouldn't be mad if Colin Farrell won. I wouldn't be mad if Brendan Fraser won. I guess I have to watch Elvis. I'm sure Austin Butler's very good in the film.
It is really nice to see Paul Mescal get recognition for his role, even though I wasn't as enthused by the movie itself as a whole. He did a really great job in that role, and he really deserves to be here. It's unfortunate that's at the expense of maybe somebody like Tom Cruise.
Yeah, I wasn't really into him being nominated.
You weren't him to be nominated?
No.
Okay.
Talk to me about why you wanted it, though.
Sometimes the acting roles get looked at in that way, that you need a very dramatic role that stands out to get a nomination for. And I just think him, in terms of being an actor, he really extends himself so much further than just doing that. And that's not to say that it's a negative for other actors. That's just something extra that he does that it would be nice to see here, because it would split up just the commonality that a lot of these actors have here in terms of their roles.
I think you're right. I hadn't considered that as part of his performance. Maybe the way we think about acting is that stereotypical view of somebody holding a skull in Hamlet's play, right? And just, you know, delivering this long monologue. And the nominees for Best Actress are Cate Blanchett for Tar, Michelle Yeoh for Everything Everywhere All at Once, Michelle Williams for The Fabelmans, Ana de Armas for Blonde, and Andrea Riseborough for To Leslie.
The one thing I'm going to mention is Cate Blanchett. I would really love to see her win this category. I've said it enough in our review, just how fantastic she plays this role in which she is so serious and seemingly so loving, even though she's not.
I would agree. I think Cate Blanchett is probably my favorite to win. Michelle Yeoh, I think, is also deserving. If she won, I certainly wouldn't be mad about it. I think one of the most interesting things is Andrea Riseborough for To Leslie. This has been a Twitter online sensation among a lot of actors and actresses who saw this performance and thought it was quite good and have been kind of spreading the word. So I am glad that she got nominated. I think the film is quite good, and I think that she's even better. Ana de Armas is 1000% the best part of Blonde. Blonde is really well made, but I think willfully misreads what its audience interpretation of the film would be. It just comes off a little gross and offensive to me. So I would take her out of this category and maybe put in one of the snubs, namely Danielle Detweiler. I want to reiterate that I think Ana de Armas is really good in Blonde, but I think her at the extent of two of the snubs were Viola Davis and Detweiler. I don't know. I would have preferred to have either of them here.
And next up, we have the nominees for Best in Directing. The nominees are Todd Field for Tar, the Daniels for Everything Everywhere All at Once, Ruben Östlund for The Triangle of Sadness, Steven Spielberg for The Fabelmans, and Mark McDonagh for The Banshees of Inisherin.
Ruben Östlund? I don't know. I actually really like him as a director. I love his films. I love Force Majeure. I love The Square. This is the first film. I've actually liked his films progressively less as he's continued making them.
I know we haven't talked about this enough, but I wish Nope got more love.
Yep.
That film, I think, is just so underrated in my personal opinion, and I could have said this in terms of production design. I could have said it in terms of the acting. There are so many instances where I could have seen Nope show up here. That is unfortunate that is not here. But with that said, my favorite is Daniels to win. I would love to see the Daniels win in terms of Everything Everywhere All at Once.
I think Martin McDonagh is fairly deserving. I think this is his first Best Director nomination. He typically gets nominated in Screenplay, but not Director. This is also Todd Field's first Best Director nomination because his prior two films he got nominated for Screenplay, but not Director. So this is a pretty good lineup.
This is a really good lineup.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be upset if any of them won, honestly.
Steven Spielberg, I think, did a great job with The Fabelmans. I don't know if he needs to win a third Oscar. I would rather
Give it to
Todd
somebody
Field win his first, Martin McDonagh win his first, or the Daniels win his first. And finally, Best Picture, we have Everything Everywhere All at Once, Elvis, Triangle of Sadness, The Banshees of Inisherin, Woman Talking, Top Gun Maverick, The Fabelmans, All Quiet on the Western Front, Tar, and Avatar: Way of Water.
I am completely rooting for Everything Everywhere All at Once here. And I know we just mentioned the director category, so it's not much of a surprise, but I think this movie has everything. It has the directing, it has the production design, it has the sound, it has the actors and the actresses. Everything about this movie, the writing, from a perspective of what makes a picture a best picture, I think it is so well-rounded of a film and achieves so much in being connected to audience, young and old, and from all different walks of life. I think this movie has something to relate towards everybody. And so I would absolutely love this movie to win. It would be so great, honestly, to see a movie with characters that have hot dogs for fingers win Best Picture. I think would absolutely be fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, a lot of the conversation around this film when it first came out before was we didn't think that it was going to have Oscar potential because it was just too weird. It was too eclectic. It was too strange. So it's cool to see it be the most nominated film this year. And I'm actually rooting for it too. I do like Tar better than this film, but I think it's almost better for the Academy for them to pick Everything Everywhere All at Once because I want them to go in a more eclectic and a more strange and bold direction with who they pick. Tar is an extremely good film, obviously, like we keep saying, but it also feels like a classical pick in some instances. You know, it's very highbrow. I also wouldn't be mad if Banshees of Inisherin won. I think that's a movie that's very deserving. I think overall this is a better crop than Best Picture last year.
And also, just to put it in perspective, I know with the pandemic, we had a lot of pause on a lot of these big pictures and movies. Seeing like Top Gun here, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Avatar to a degree, I think. They're movies here that are a little bit more sizable than movies we had seen maybe in recent years.
Yep.
There's just a really nice mix of independent film and big budget films, which I think complement each other very well and make this a very well-rounded category. All right, and that's it for our whirlwind of a conversation on this year's Oscar nominees. If you have any opinions on this year's crop of Oscar nominees, let us know in the comments. What did you think? Did something get snubbed? Is there something in here that you're really excited about and you really want to win? Let us know. As always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.